Hey guys, this is Mrs. Barnes. I am getting ready to go on a weekend trip through Virginia to a couple of different cities. And before I go on my trip, I want to have an idea of how long my trip is going to be for a couple of reasons. If I know the distance of my trip, I can, one, figure out how long it's going to take me to travel if I approximate that I'm driving at around 60 miles per hour. But I can also calculate my fuel costs. If I'm going to be driving, how much is it going to cost me to get to all these places? So let me start by taking you through my trip really fast. I live in Fairfax, which is right here on the map, and you guys should have a copy of this paper in front of you too. Over the weekend, and this is for real, of September 22nd to 24th, Staunton, Virginia actually puts on a Harry Potter themed event, and in this old historic town, all the restaurants and stores kind of transform into Harry Potter style stores, kind of like Hogsmeade. So I wanted to go visit that. And I also have a wedding that weekend in Petersburg, Virginia. Okay. But if I go to Staunton on Saturday and the wedding's on Sunday, I need somewhere to stay that night. I went to school in Charlottesville, Virginia for college, and so I'm going to stop there on Saturday and stay with them for the night. So I'm starting here in Fairfax, which is approximately at this point on the map. I'm going to be driving to Staunton, which is approximately here. Then I'm going to drive to Charlottesville, which is approximately here. And then I'm going to drive to Petersburg, which is approximately here. And then I'm going to drive home. So I'm going to connect those. Why don't you guys do this with me? And if you need to pause the video to connect these, you can. But I'm going to start in Fairfax. I'm going to drive to Staunton. That night, I'm going to drive to Charlottesville. The next day, I'm going to drive to Petersburg. And then lastly, I'm going to drive home. Now, we have a way to find the distance between 2 points on a coordinate plane. And notice this map has been overlaid with a coordinate plane using something that we have called the distance formula. Now, before I can use the distance formula, I actually need to know the coordinates of my points. So I'm going to go and find the coordinates of Fairfax first. Notice I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is at the point 6, comma 7 for Fairfax. I know it's a little hard to see on my map, but that was 6, comma 7. Staunton from my origin is backwards 2 and up 3. So backwards 2, up 3. Remember, whenever we do points, and I'll make a note of this over here, whenever we do points, it's always the x coordinate and then the y coordinate. The x coordinate is your side to side. Your y is your up and down. Okay, so Charlottesville is at over 1, up 2. And then Petersburg is over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, down 1, 2, 3. So I told you guys a minute ago that we have something called the distance formula that lets me find the distance between 2 points if I have the x and the y coordinates. So I'm going to start with Fairfax and Staunton. My distance formula, this is something you're going to have to memorize, is that the distance between 2 points can be calculated by taking the square root of the difference of the x coordinates squared plus a difference in the y coordinates squared. So go ahead and take a moment, write that down. We're going to be using that a lot. So the distance formula is the difference of the x coordinates squared plus a difference in the y coordinates squared. So let's give an example. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go from Fairfax to Staunton. So what I want you to do down here is go ahead and write. We're going to go from Fairfax to Staunton. Fairfax is at 6, comma 7, and Staunton is at negative 2, 3. So we're going to calculate that now. So remember the distance formula is a difference in the x coordinates squared plus a difference in the y coordinates squared. Well, that means we need to know what my x and y coordinates are, which one's which. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my points and I'm going to say, okay, Fairfax is my first set of points. So this is going to be my x1 and my y1. It's the x coordinate of the first point and the y coordinate of the first point. This is the x coordinate of my second point and the y coordinate of my second point. You can pick which one's point 1 and which one's point 2, but if this is point 1, this has to be x1 and y1. This is point 2, this is x2 and y2. So the 2's have to be in the same point, the 1's have to be from the same point. So now let's see if we can start filling some things in. The x coordinates are -2 and 6. The y coordinates were 3 and 7. -2 minus 6 is a -8. 3 minus 7 is -4. -8 squared is 64. -4 squared is 16. Remember, when I square a negative number, it's going to become positive. So I have -4 times -4. That's what that's saying. So these parentheses are really important. Okay. So now I'm going to take the square root of this. Well, if we take a look, 64 plus 16 is 80. So I'm taking the square root of 80. So I'm going to do second, this yellow button. This, oh, you guys can't see it. Right here is the square root. So square root, so yellow, and then this, that's my square root of, and I wanted to take it of 80. Okay. Or if you wanted to, you could just do the square root of 64 plus 16. Just make sure you close your parentheses when you're done, and you'll notice you get the same thing. So my distance is 8.9. Now when this says 8.9, it's talking about 8.9 boxes. So this is a slanted diagonal line, right? I'm not going over a certain amount and down. This is a diagonal length of about 8.9 of these boxes. And I'm going to tell you guys really fast. One of these boxes is approximately 10 miles. So at the end, we'll figure out how long this really is. So this driving section is about 89 miles is what that's telling us. So we just found the distance between Fairfax and Staunton. And actually, I'll write the distance is really approximately 89 miles. Okay. So now we're at Staunton. I went to my Harry Potter festival, but now I need to drive to Charlottesville to spend the night. So I'm going from Staunton to, and I'm going to put Seville for Charlottesville. It's just a little bit shorter. Staunton, 3. Charlottesville is at 1,2. Okay. Here's my first point, so x1, y1. Here's my second point, x2, y2. And I should repeat, I should have said this earlier, you guys should be writing all this down with me as we go. So if you need to go back, you can go back. So let's take the distance between these 2 points. So it's a difference of the x coordinates squared plus a difference in the y coordinates squared. Okay, let's plug in what we know. x2 is 1, x1 is -2, so minus a -2. y2 is 2, y1 is 3. That's going to give me 3. That's going to be a -1 squared. So that's going to give me the square root of 9 plus 1. That's the square root of 10. So I'm going to go in my calculator, and I'm going to do the square root of 10. And that gives me about 3.16. Let's call that 3.2. Round that to 3.2. Okay? So that's about 3.2 boxes. Each box is about 10 miles. So that's approximately 32 miles. Okay, so now I've spent the night in Charlottesville. I need to go to my wedding in Petersburg. So I'm going from Seville to Petersburg. Charlottesville is at 1,2. Petersburg is at 6, this is my first point. This is my second point. So I've got a difference of my x coordinates squared, a difference of my y coordinates squared, x2 is 6, x1 is 1, y2 is -3, y1 is 2, so that's going to be 5, that's going to give me -5, that's going to be 25 and 25. So that's the square root of 50. So I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to do the square root of 50. I get 7.07, so about 7.1 if I'm rounding to the tenths place. Which we said we multiply by 10 because each box is about 10 miles. So that's about 71 miles. Okay, I've got one more trip to make because I'm at Petersburg, but I certainly want to go home at the end of the weekend because I got to come back to school and teach you guys all on that Monday. So right now I'm in Petersburg. And I've got to go back to Fairfax. Petersburg was at 6, -3. Fairfax was at 6, 7. This is my first point. This is my second point. We want to write out the distance formula every time because otherwise we're not going to memorize it as quickly. So writing it a lot helps you memorize it. So remember, it's a distance squared plus a difference in the y coordinates squared. Okay, so my second x is 6. My first x, my second y was 7. My first y was -3. So I have 0 squared plus 10 squared. So I really just have the square root of 0 plus 10 squared is 100. And the square root of 100 is 10. Okay? Which we said is approximately, we're going to multiply that by 10, 100 miles. So at the beginning of this, I said my goal is to figure out how long my trip is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, my drive to Staunton was about 89 miles. My drive to Charlottesville was about 32 miles. There we go, you can see better. My drive to Petersburg was about 71 miles. And then my drive home was about 100 miles. So in the whole trip, my total distance traveled was approximately 292 miles. So now I can figure out if I'm going 60 miles per hour, it's going to take me about almost 5 hours to do the whole thing. I can figure out how much gas it's going to take or what my cost is going to be, but we're just going to leave it at total distance for now. So you guys can see now how if we use a map with a grid, we can use the distance formula to approximate our total distance. It's kind of what things like MapQuest and our phones are doing. So go ahead and flip this over to the back now. You guys are going to do exactly what I just did, but you're going to go on a parks adventure. So I love national parks, and in the